Well, thank you everybody for joining our webinar, Optimize Your Inventory 2023 with Gains. I am Maria Marchesi. I'm part of the product team. I've been with Gains 2 years now, and I'm glad to share this content to you with you today. So first, let's begin to understand what is happening right now. And it's not something new, and the things that changes and the constant unexpected environmental things are not new. But lately we have seen increase in transit inventory, the rate hikes, material shortage, the lead time variability, the higher inflation, and the need to reduce working capital. All of those variabilities, of course, affects the supply chain and the inventory decisions that we need to take on a daily basis. So the idea and all the context about this webinar is knowing that things are changing and that we need to make constant decision what is the best approach to make those in the best way possible for our business. So this is the context of this webinar today. We have seen that even though we have had systems and we have had different processes among the years, in average, in all the industry segments, the days of inventory are still increasing. So it's not an easy problem to solve. It is not any solution that will apply to everybody. But what I will say is that inventory, it's a decision that we need to take control. We don't have a magic ball to understand everything that it's going to happen, but we could have some frameworks that will help you to get the right decisions in the right time. And that's what we are going to go through today. So that's the first piece, how to adapt to these new conditions. For us in Gains, the decision making are really based on different interconnect decisions that you need to take into account. From an inventory perspective, there are three main questions that you need to understand how to address, but also you need to have the conscious that all are interconnected. So the first piece, the first chapter of that decision is how do I need to configure the network to meet the service promise? And it is always, I think of this from a soccer or a match perspective. So that first piece is going to drive the field where I'm going to play, and it will help me to understand what are the tools and resources that I'm going to have. So when I begin to play, I will actually know how to use the best way those resources. So that's the first piece. What is the network that I need? Where are the sites? What are the policies of how I'm going to store the things? What are the different frequencies of revision of those policies and even for the decisions? So after doing that, or as we do that, we also need to take into account that even though you have this perfect field map and you already have some decisions where you think that you have all the tools in place and all the resources in place from a plan perspective, there are things that are going to change. So how to address those changes? Who is going to make the last call? What are the drivers to make those decisions when something happens and when you need to react to that change? And the last piece is from the sourcing and the manufacturing perspective. What are those decisions that you need to take into account when you look at the inventory? So we're going to go deeper in all of those chapters and all of those decisions, thinking that we are always answering questions and we are always challenged in what are the best way to get to those answers. So when we begin to think about that first piece of the network, there are main key things that you need to take into account when you are addressing that piece. The first one is the service promises that is right for the company. So you need to understand your customers, the segmentation, the strategy of your company, what is the best way to address my resources and the promise that I'm making to the market, so I can configure all the inventory policies that will really help to provide those promises to the customers. The second piece is always trying to understand where should I put my inventory. There's always this open question where a lot of people ask, like, should I have more product when it sells the most or when it serves more customers? And these are usually conversations that came up with the sales team and the logistics team, or the teams that are in charge of the inventory planning. So addressing those questions and those decisions and having clear policies inside the company of how we are going to address those will help you when the times change and when you need to make unexpected decisions. Next, we have everything around inventory and product flow configuration. So it's not just of where the facilities are and the sites are, but how you are going to move all the product within that. What is the product flow? Where you are going to have batches or cross-dock or storage, or when it is appropriate to have push inventory or pull inventory or just-in-time strategy. So we have a lot of different frameworks that will help us within different circumstances and for different strategies. So we need to take into account that segmentation to really get the best decisions in all cases. Of course, to do all of that, we need to understand where are our restrictions, and that's not always an easy task. Understanding the bottlenecks, but not only the physical bottlenecks, but also the bottlenecks in the process, as well as the objectives in the strategy are going to be key pieces to go through a really good inventory management practices. How much inventory should I have? I think that is one of the first one that came in our minds. Then how balance the inventory when we have like constrained resources for inventory investment in inventory position, and then balance the invest capital and the cash flow. And of course, how do I prevent the stockouts, but also the obsolescence? So what is the right balance, the optimized position from the inventory, and how much product do I need in each of the sites? So when we have all those considerations and we begin to really design the network, then we also need to talk about what is going to happen when the things are not going as we plan. So these are like the 4 most common decisions that you need to take into account. And again, this is to define policies, internal policies within the company, so you can know how to react when these things happen among the different teams. So how should I distribute the products when there's not enough to meet the demand? What I'm going to prioritize? I'm going to prioritize a specific project or a specific customer or a specific SKUs in different locations. So it is going to be by yield. All of those policies should be really understood, even from the management team, leadership team, but also for the people that it's in the field moving the products around. So we are aligned on that product flow and how to attend those last minute decisions. The same happen when I don't have enough product, what it's going to be the effect on the orders and how I'm going to communicate to the customer those changes. And if I can renegotiate delivery times, especially when you are in a business to business type of environment, how do you really align the expected dates with customers so you have a better service promise and fill rates? Then when I have all of this in place and I have systems that could help me to identify when I'm going to have those delays and where customers are going to be affected, then can I really predict where I'm going to fulfill an order? So can I really begin to negotiate those delivery dates up front based on that information that I'm getting from these new processes or this augment processes? And the last one is when I should change the date, advance, delay, or cancel an order. So everything around when I have less inventory than I expected, but also when I have too much inventory, what is the best way to go there and to make decisions around that specific environment. The last piece is about the supplier. And when I talk about supplier and purchases, I'm also talking about the manufacturing piece. So everything that it's going as an input in the supply chain. When I'm talking about inventory and I'm taking into account those elements, there are really, really key pieces that we need to take into account. Can I take the advantage of that project information? Can I go and talk with the purchases and the suppliers to have better quantity times and trends conversation that will help us to have a better plan, common supply chain? So it's how I really begin to take advantage of that extended supply chain within that information. Then how do I refine rules such as quantity, frequency of purchases, and maximize the resources and minimize cost? So there are some practices where all those policies are set up just based on commercial conversations within the providers, but what if we can really understand what are the impacts of those decisions within the supply chain and the overall cost and the service to our final customers? That it's really good key thing to take into account and to include in our planning process from an inventory perspective. How do we measure the impact of buying offers and discounts? So again, not thinking about that specific process isolated, but also how to include all of that impact of the cost of inventory, cash flow, inventory cycles within the complete infrastructure of our supply chain. And the last but not least is how minimize the risk. And there are a lot of new content there outside talking about this multi-supplier best practices. How do you really begin to diversify your supply base? So it is not just having more suppliers per se, but it's really how to have the best way to manage them, how to purchase products from each of them the right time, and how to manage all the relationship, taking into account the quality of the product, the lead times, the confidence of that specific product. So taking into account all those variabilities will help you when you really design this new inventory strategy. But we said that we were going to share with you some practices of how to handle this inventory in this always changing environment. So after taking into account the complexity of inventory decisions, we want to share with you a framework of these 5 steps that you should take into account to address that question of how to optimize inventory in turbulent times. That honestly, there are most of the times in our current environment. So the first one is do a self-assessment. Getting a conscious diagnosis as a team, and maybe this can be framework as a workshop or whiteboard exercise. When you begin to note all the things that you have right now, the position that you have right now, where do you want to go, and addressing the gaps, identifying the gaps will help you just to start to have better practices when it comes to inventory turbulent times. You know how to prioritize the things that you just discovered. So having like a really integral evaluation and diagnosis of your as-is state. Second piece will be understand variability. So a lot of people is trying to fight, and it's trying to have a lot of tools to really get to the minimum error when forecasting, because we don't want variability and we want to be more each time more certainty about what's going to happen. But the reality is, as I mentioned, we don't have a magic ball, and the variability is going to happen, and the unexpected things are going to happen. So begin to think in the supply chain and the policies and in the processes, taking into account that variability and how we are going to address it. It's a really good way to begin to change the things and to embrace the change and the variability. So incorporate those using advanced analytics, using better tools that will help you to not just have one answer, but also having the understanding of the sensibility analysis of all the things that could happen and how you could address those within some ranges of action. The third one is streamline the configuration of policies and business rules. So understanding that some years ago, saying that we have a fixed policy or fixed business rules was valid just because the speed of change was slower. But now you need to take into account that all those revisions of inventory policy, business rules, frequency of revision, as frequent as you have it and as optimal you have that process, will help you to really change as the speed of the changes around you. And it's going to help you to have also a differentiated position within your environment and your business. The fourth step is focus on exception management and product process automation. We have already talked about the need to have the best use of our resources. So let's the human do the things that humans are really good and where we really add value. But there are a lot of tasks that could be automated. So everything around automation and really have exception-based rules when the human added value it's going to be needed are really good practices, not only because of the speed, but also because you want to have people that it's working in the supply chain and that really feels that they are making an impact in the business. So this really helps in a lot of different perspectives in the companies in these environments of change. And the last one is configure the network to differentiate on service. We can't stress this enough. Service is the main lead purpose. So everything around how do I segment the service? How do I really begin to understand what is the impact in the service? From the start to the end of the process, it's going to help you to know how to address those unexpected changes and those frequent changes within your supply chain. So that's kind of the framework that we advise to take within these 5 steps to get to have a really good practices to address the changes within the supply chain. So decisions aren't simple. It's not a simple supply chain. It is a complex network. So thinking about it and thinking that there are a lot of random variabilities across this, it makes sense to have systems that will help you getting into account all of that and having advanced analytics to really address the speed of the things and the decisions that you need to make. So it's changing the business thinking to plan for sanity, to plan for change, and to really get above and beyond for your customers. So that's the content that I wanted to share with you today. We thank you for your participation and for listening for this recording. So please follow us in all our media channels and hope to see you soon in any other communications.